Hi, my name's Isaac, and this is a 1972 Oldsmobile 442. Technically, it's an Oldsmobile Cutlass Supreme, and the trim is 442, but for the 1971 model year, it was just called the 442. It's a complicated story. We'll get to that. It starts out very exciting and then quickly becomes confusing and muddled. Kind of like when you're driving down the road listening to the radio and the DJ goes, "Up next, it's Walking in Memphis." And you're like, "Man, I love Walking in Memphis. This is a great song." And then he goes, "By Cher." And you're like, what? If you guys are new to my channel, I don't traditionally review classic cars on here, but I got the unique opportunity to do so with this one and a couple of other really cool classics that I'm going to do in future videos for you guys. So I figured I'd take advantage of the opportunity and show you guys around this often forgotten muscle car. Starting out up front on the 442, before we get into the story of why the history of this 1972 model is so confusing, let's start out with the features up front here. You actually get functional hood vents up here, functional hood scoops you can put your hand in. A lot of the modern vehicles that I review have fake hood scoops. Not all of them, but a lot of them do have fake ones. So it's nice to see that they're real here. I'd expect no less on a 70s muscle car. Moving down here, you have this really nice grille with the 442 badge in here, dual headlights, and then lights down here. I think these are your turn signals. They might be your fog lights. I think they're the turn signals though. And you do have this giant chrome bumper going across the bottom. I really like the chrome here. I've mentioned in the past how I don't really like chrome, and I'm gonna retract that statement. I think I don't like chrome if it's not done tastefully, and I think it's done really well here. I think it looks really nice on this 442, and it makes the car stand out and look a little bit more aggressive. Nowadays, with all these modern pickup trucks, they just throw chrome all over the place. I just don't think that looks good. In comparison here, I think it looks really nice on here. You also have the Oldsmobile logo, something that many of you might not even be familiar with, since Oldsmobile was discontinued in the early 2000s amid the financial crisis alongside other GM brands like Pontiac and Hummer. So some of you might not even be familiar with this logo. Now, I have the unique history of the first minivan my family ever had. The first vehicle I remember growing up was a 1999 Oldsmobile Silhouette, so I have a little bit of history kind of tied into the Oldsmobile brand. 1999 Oldsmobile Silhouette, definitely not as cool as this 72. Moving underneath the hood in the 442, it's powered by a 455 V8, making 250 horsepower and 370 pound-feet of torque. But it wasn't always like that. For the 1971 and the 70 model year, it actually made more horsepower and more torque. But this is where a little bit of the mystery of this car is explained. It's kind of an enigma. So basically in 1972, the government stepped in and said, we need to have more regulations on emissions. And so they made a lot of the car manufacturers change the emissions on here to meet the standards of what they wanted. That meant that Oldsmobile was going to have to change some of the components in this car. Now, up to this point, what they had also been doing was they would measure the car's horsepower by doing what's called brake horsepower. When they would dyno the car, they would get the horsepower numbers from the engine, but there was no other components attached to it. So while technically, yes, that was the best possible horsepower numbers for the car, and that looked great on advertising, unfortunately, that was unachievable for the regular person because when they added everything else back in, the horsepower numbers were lower. So that's what they had to do for the 1972 model year. This car, they had to do what was called net horsepower, and they would dyno the car with all the components inside of it, thus giving a more accurate horsepower number for the actual car, but that also brought the horsepower numbers down in addition to all the components that were added to meet emissions standards. Moving on to the profile of the 442, before we get to the rest of the mystery, I do want to go over some of the exterior features here on the side. This is a convertible. I happen to think this white convertible top contrasts really nicely with this Viking blue exterior color. You don't see cool colors that pop like this too much anymore, especially with this white pinstriping on the side, and you never see this. I love this. You get the Viking blue color actually in the wheel itself. That is definitely very 70s. Also, whatever happened to cool colored convertible tops like this? That's a tongue twister. Say that 10 times fast. Cool colored convertible tops like this. This white is really, really cool. Nowadays, generally, we just see black ones, even on high-end luxury cars, very occasionally red ones, but I like unique colors like this. I think it stands out. So, this is the same exact body style as the 1970 and the 71 442, with some minor facelift elements to it. Basically what Oldsmobile wanted to do was, for the 1973 model year, phase out the 442 and make it a trim level for the Cutlass Supreme. So you would get a Cutlass Supreme, then you would get a 442 if you wanted it like that. They were phasing it out. Up until now, this had kind of been a sub-model in the Oldsmobile lineup. So they hadn't yet come up with that design for the 1973 model yet. It wasn't ready to be produced, so they had to get a car out, so they kind of merged them together. It says Cutlass Supreme on the inside of the car here on the dash, but it retains most of the elements of the original 442 from the previous years, but the horsepower and torque is down because of the emissions regulations, so it's kind of a weird hybrid of a car. It's very unique and fairly rare. Moving to the back of the 442, you'll have a 442 badge on the back right. The pinstriping continues back here, and you get this really cool split taillight design. I really like that against this giant chrome bumper, and you get dual chrome exhaust back here. Moving inside the trunk, there isn't anything too particularly unique back here, spare tire and the like, but one thing I wanted to highlight was the trunk does have a light, but the way that the light comes on is, well, it's very old school. We don't really see that. So the spring, as it comes up here, it hits the light, and then that triggers the light to come on. When nowadays, you know, we have computers that say, oh, trunk's open, turn the light on. Moving into the interior of the 442, the first thing I have to say about it is it just feels durable. I feel like nowadays I've been in some modern GM cars, and it just feels like they cheap out wherever they can on these cars, you know. Dinky plastics, and the door handles kind of like rough. Now, this car was restored, but it's all genuine Oldsmobile parts, and it really feels durable. Like this was built with care. Like the people that built it, like were like, yes, this is a cool car. Moving on, I guess we'll start with the gauge cluster. Obviously, no digital readout on this one. You do have your readout for your fuel, and then it says hot oil gen brake. I think that's a t-shirt, hot oil gen brake. And that basically gives you a readout of everything in there. And then you have your speedometer and your tachometer. And then you have these old analog buttons for your wipers. You have a turn signal. And then this is the button for your top to come up and down, which is just crazy. Also, you do have, there's an original radio, technically. So this is a radio of the time. The owner and I were talking beforehand, and he thinks the original only came in AM. Now this one happens to be an AM FM, and you push this to the side and it analogically flips another little channel readout so you can tune between the channels. The thing is though, he added Bluetooth. When the car was being restored, he added Bluetooth because he does drive this car from time to time, and he wanted the kind of modern amenities of Bluetooth, so it's very cleverly implemented into here. The mic for the Bluetooth is up there. Moving down here, you do have an automatic transmission. This has an early version of the like slap shift manual that we kind of have in a lot of modern automatic cars. My truck even has it. You know, you shift over and you shift between the gears, but in this one you shift down and then you can go between third, second, and first. As far as I know, that wasn't something that was being widely adopted at the time. So let's take an exhaust note, because what would a muscle car review be without an exhaust note? Moving to the back seats of the 442, they're back seats all right. Two really cool things back here as I was getting in here that I noticed. Number one, you have power window switches for the rear quarter windows here. I can't imagine that was too common back in the day. Also, you get a little ashtray on each side because, you know, every single person in the world smoked in the 70s, so you got to have that. Also, you have a button right here that pushes the seat forward. Here's the second really crazy thing that I found back here. This is power-operated seats. I can't reach it, but I'll do a cutaway. But this is, I would imagine, light years ahead of its time. I can only imagine that back in the day that really only a lot of higher-end luxury cars had power seats. Maybe I'm wrong, and I'm sure somebody will correct me in the comments. Oh, I had a 70s Pinto, and it had power seats. Okay, but I just thought that was really cool because I was not expecting this to have power-operated seats for the 1970s. I guess I wasn't expecting it to have a power-operated top either. So, here we are driving the 442. This is Jed, the owner of the vehicle. And so Jed if you would, I don't know why I yelled that. If you could explain kind of the family heritage of this car, because I think it's really interesting. He was explaining to me beforehand, and I figured instead of having me try to retell the story to you guys, I could just have Jed during the drive kind of explain the history of this car and why it's so special to him. So take it away.
So I've owned this car now for 30 years already. Wow.
30 years,
yeah, hard to believe. But it's been in my family now 4 times. I represent the 4th occurrence within the family. The car was leased new in 1972 by my father's first cousin, who also happened to be my godfather.
Okay.
It was just a business car. The lease was paid for by his employer. The car came off the lease in the spring of 1975, and my father had seen his cousin driving the car, and he loved the car. So my father went and bought the car from the lease company in the spring of 75.
Okay.
As I recall, he had to paint it right away because the paint was already bad. 3 years old. It'll take up quality of cars then.
Yeah.
But, so he had the car, drove it for about a year, and he spotted, I think it was December of 75, he spotted a 1969 Jaguar XKE Roadster on a used car lot on his way to work one day. And he stopped and he made a couple of inquiries about it. He had had another E-Type years before, and just wanted to have another one.
Another one, yeah.
So he had made some inquiries. They couldn't come to a deal. He wanted to trade this car. The dealer wouldn't take this car. It wasn't their kind of car.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So, but my father was persistent. The car was still there in January.
Okay. That always bodes well.
In the dead of winter, when my father guessed that the Jaguar wouldn't start. And he went in there one day with this car and asked for them to start it up for him, and they couldn't get it to start. He knew he had him, so he made a deal.
Yeah.
He traded this car and $1,500, and he got the E-Type.
Wow, that's a good deal. That's a very good deal.
Well, at the time, that was probably all any of these were worth.
Were worth, yeah.
So he kept that E-Type to the day he died.
Yeah, wow.
I still have the car today.
Yes. Tentatively upcoming review.
Possibly.
Yes.
So, my father was a lawyer. He worked for our county at the time. One day he's going into work that spring, and he happens to spot the Oldsmobile in the employee parking lot.
Yeah.
So he figures, well, somebody who works for the county must have bought the car. So he starts putting the word out, tracks down that a secretary in the county building had purchased the car, tells her if she ever wants to sell the car, he'd be interested in buying it. Fast forward another year, the second gas crunch hits. The price of gas skyrockets. And the secretary calls my father, practically in tears, according to my father, that she couldn't afford to put gas in this car anymore.
Yeah.
So, and I can tell you from personal experience, I've never owned a car that sucks gas like this one.
Yeah.
So, he ends up purchasing the car back.
Okay, yeah.
Owns it a very short period, 6-8 months, something like that. And a local judge, county judge, my father knew, sees him driving the car and just falls instantly in love with it. And he starts pestering my father to sell him the car.
Yeah.
And so that's what my father does. He sells him the car. So that's 1977, 78.
Yeah.
He drives the car daily till about 1989.
Okay.
Kind of semi-retires the car to coincide with him retiring from the bench, and he returns to private practice. Decides he needs a more professional looking car to drive every day.
Of course.
This car sits under a tree at his house where it was degrading.
Yeah.
And he calls my dad and he says, do you want to buy the car back? My father called me said, should I buy this car again? And I said, no, you shouldn't.
Yeah.
You've had 2 chances. You keep selling it.
Exactly.
And I said, I'm going to buy it, and it's going to stay around this time.
Oh, let's see this.
So that's what I did, 1990.
Okay, wow. So you've had it since 90.
Yep, I bought the car. It had 151,000 miles. They were
Wow.
clearly very hard miles.
Yeah.
It was smoking horribly.
Wow.
The paint was ruined, the top was ruined, the interior was a shambles. I brought the car home. It needed to be restored. I realized I couldn't do it. I was actually working on some other car projects at the time.
Yeah.
So I put it aside, and it took until 2010 till I decided to do something with the car.
Yeah.
I really wanted to get it restored so my father would have a chance to see it done. Unfortunately, the restoration shop couldn't get the car in until 2012.
Wow.
And just weeks before the car was scheduled to go to the restoration shop, my father was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer.
Yeah.
So I asked the shop if we could reschedule, because I knew I was going to be very busy caring for my
I
father.
can imagine.
And we actually got my father through the pancreatic cancer, which is pretty amazing. That would have taken us to the spring or early summer of 2014.
Okay. Yeah.
And I called the shop to reschedule. We got it in their schedule for late fall of 2014. Unfortunately, my father was diagnosed with yet another cancer, head and neck cancer, in August of 2014, and he passed away Thanksgiving weekend, 2014.
Sorry to hear
The
that.
car was scheduled to go to the restoration shop the following week. So Dad never did get to see the restoration started or done to any degree.
That sucks.
But I went ahead and did the restoration, full ground up restoration.
Yeah.
I drove it out of the shop August of 2018.
Great. Wow. So this is semi-recent. Yeah.
Yeah, this is fairly recent. The car has about 2,500 miles on it since restoration. I do take it out and drive it. It doesn't just sit in the garage and get wiped down.
That's good.
Yeah, I mean, it's got working factory air, so I can, on the hottest days, just put the windows up and turn on the air and go have a drive.
That's awesome. And it's so cool, and that's why I wanted him to share, just because that's such a unique story. You know, you don't really get those type of really cool, unique stories anymore. And you know, a lot of people are like, oh, I have a classic car, I bought it, and I bought the classic car, and that's it. But you have this rich heritage with this car, which is so cool, going back in your family. I think that's really neat.
To me, that's the draw.
Yeah.
I'm not a muscle car guy at heart. I wouldn't have set out to buy this car if it wasn't for the family connection.
Yeah.
You know, it's just another thing to connect me to my dad. That was important to me.
Yeah, and
it connects me to my youth. This is one of the early cars that I remember as a kid. I would have been 9, 10 years old when my dad had this car, and you know, I can remember when I sat in this very seat and I couldn't see over the dashboard.
That's wild. That is crazy. That's, isn't it crazy? That's awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing to me when I think about it all of those years ago.
Yeah. And here you are now with it fully restored to its former glory.
Well, I'll say it's a lot better today than it was when
back in when it came out of the factory. Yeah. As I mentioned earlier in this video, I'm just so impressed with how built this feels. It feels solid. It does feel almost like it's new, like it was built with care. And when they restored it, you can definitely tell that it was built with care. And
I can assure you the paint was not this good when it was new.
Yeah, when it was new and everything like that. Yeah.
No.
And for brief driving impressions, because of the emissions regulations with its downgraded horsepower and stuff, it drives like a car. It's not like crazy, like, wow, this drives so amazing. It handles nicely, When you give it gas, it gasses and goes. It's fun to drive, but it's not, you know, Corvette level with this V8 in it. But it's still definitely a very nice, unique drive. I definitely like it. Yeah.
It's a nice cruiser. That's how I describe it.
That's great. That's a perfect
car to go cruising.
Excellent. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Jeff, for allowing me the opportunity for this. It's so much fun to be able to do this, and thanks for riding along with us.
My pleasure.
Great. All right, cool. That'll wrap up the interior here. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. This is kind of a new type of video for me to be able to do this kind of walk around history of the car, but I thought it would be really cool and you guys would like it. I know that most of my subscribers are truck guys, so hopefully this was a cool change of pace. If you could like the video, that would really help if you could hit the little thumbs up and subscribe. That would really help my channel quite a lot. I hope that you guys have a great rest of your day, and no matter what car you drive, that it lasts you a long time and it serves you well. If you have any prayer requests, you can leave that in the comment section below. I'm a Christian and I like to connect with everybody in my comment section, and I thought the best way to be able to do that is if you guys have prayer requests, that I'd pray for you guys. All right, take care guys. Till next time.